Is it worth having two cutting edges? I cut like this. Here the cut is clean, as we already know. And here, this jig with bearings and the back support are quite well centered. Maybe there is almost a millimeter more on one side than the other. No big deal. In this video, we will also see how to get a clean cut on both sides of the kerf. I am going to glue this wood strip, roughly centered on the base. To have more support at the entry point, I let it stick out here. And the same at the exit. I let the fast glue dry. And one thing I almost forgot. The length of the base is shorter than the maximum length that the jig with bearings allows to cut. Now I have to add the backstop for 90-degree cuts. But before that, I have to trim the exact width on each side. That's the maximum width it can cut until it hits there. Okay, let's keep going. First I cut like this, and now I will cut like this. The backstop sticks out to the sides. I'll trim that later, and I'll explain why I did it this way. Now, I'm going to glue the backstop at 90 degrees. That mark is just to know where to apply the fast glue. I place it as perfectly as I can at 90 degrees. And when the glue is dry, I trim the excess on each side. On this side, it ended up perfectly at 90 degrees. On this other side, there's a tiny little gap. Good enough. It's important to cut with the base of the jig with bearings, well pressed against the correct side of the wood strip. And I want the lower stop block well aligned at the entry point, because that gives support to the saw blade, and it helps the blade enter the wood straighter. Let's test it. I put the backstop against the wood, and I align the edge to the cutting line. And do I need to clamp it? Well, just by pressing it down a little, even if I push hard, it doesn't move sideways. But I prefer to use a clamp. This way, while cutting the wood, I can use one hand to push the jig with bearings against the guide strip. All right, pretty good. And the vertical cut, as always, is perfect. Okay, I cut that end. And now on this cutting line, I could cut like this. Or better, as we will see, from the other side. And on this other line, I can always use the other side. But, is it worth having two cutting edges? I just have to set the jig like this. And I could cut, but I prefer to always cut from the same edge of the board. Because when I marked the cutting lines, I did it using the straightest edge of the board. The other edge is very slightly bowed. I bought these boards like that. When marking, I made sure to use the straightest edge of the board as reference. I did this with all the boards. Marked all of them using their straightest edge. So, let's go ahead and cut here. And then we'll see a trick to make cleaner cuts. Before cutting, on the final pieces I made a mark on the reference edge, so I know which one it is. Okay, but why is one side of the cut clean, and the other side needs sanding to remove the splinters? The base of the jig holds the wood, and prevents tear out as the teeth of the saw blade exit cutting upward. But on the other side of the cutting line, the base of the jig with bearings is hanging in the air, and there's nothing holding the wood when the saw teeth exit upward. Alright, so, would it be better to use the saw like this, with just a side guide strip? A thin plywood sheet like this, cut to the exact width from the saw blade to the edge of the jig, would help position the side guide strip correctly. The downside is that the methacrylate base has worn down around the saw blade, and it no longer makes such a clean cut. But also, I've always found woodworking jigs with a base that goes right against the cutting line to be more precise. Here I'll cut just halfway through. Look closely. The cut underneath the jig is super clean, and the other side is a bit chipped. Well, I also need to change the saw blade already. It's already a bit worn. The bottom part of the cut is clean because the teeth cut upward and into the wood. So my idea is to place a sheet of the same thickness like this, and cut there. But here, at the end of the board, it's not worth it, because what chips is the leftover piece that I won't be using. But here, it is worth it. I placed the sheet against the base of the cutting jig, and I clamped it with a clamp. This way, I can also hold the board at the end of the cut. What do you think? Is this working well? When I place the clamp, I have to make sure the saw won't hit it. Okay, a little issue. I should align the front of this thin sheet with the exit edge of the wood, so it doesn't break off like that, with that jump at the end. Okay, let's check this. I cut like this. Here the cut is clean, as we already know. And here, look at that, a perfect cut. But I will be wearing out that thin plywood sheet every time I use it, right? Yes, but just a few millimeters, so I can use it many times. I'll leave you the link to the video where I made the jig with bearings on my other channel without commentary. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like my videos, subscribe and hit the bell.